go into multi-purpose greases. Multi-purpose greases combine two to six different types of soap-based greases based on the type of application it's going to have with cold, hot, high speed, low speed, continuous use, non-continuous use. Those are things we consider when looking at multi-purpose grease. A multi-purpose grease is good in industry because it limits the number of different types of greases that a company has to be stocked. Some companies go through hundreds of thousands of gallons of grease, daily, weekly, monthly. And if you can combine a couple of these types of greases, or if you just combine two of these greases, you can cut your storage in half, which gives you more money for productivity, more room for other things you need to do, and stuff like that. It also helps reduce the chance of using the wrong grease, because if you would use barium-based soap grease at very high speed, it would break down really fast, and the friction caused by the parts would turn the grease to a liquid. The grease would run off, and the parts would rub and ruin the parts. Some of these parts would cost upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace, and use the wrong grease from that small error, you'd be in big trouble. And then they're useful for specific and common applications like I just talked about. The properties of good multi-purpose grease would be perform well in a number of applications. Like I said, high melting point, because most greases you're going to use are going to try to reduce the friction. Friction causes heat. If it has a high melting point, it's not going to turn into a liquid and run as easily as a low melting point would. They have to operate well at continuous temperatures above 250. That ties to the melting point. It must be water resistant. They must be stable. Very stable, as in they don't oxidize with the metals they're on. They don't oxidize with the atmosphere around them. They don't oxidize from if they're running in seawater, if they're running in tap water. So the more stable they are, the better they are, and usually the more expensive they are. And stability all comes from the additives added to the greases. And then problems to overcome in the future of greases. Eliminate restrictions by finding new additives. This goes back to the multi-purpose greases. If we find, right now I talk about three additives, the three soap-based greases. Additives would be the barium, the lithium, and the sodium. If we could find other elements, maybe lanthanides or maybe even radioactive elements, we might be able to limit the need for individual barium lithium greases and just have all multi-purpose greases, which could ultimately to maybe 12 to 15 different types of components that the greases are used for. And then another big thing is lubrication in space. With vacuum conditions, it's very hard to lubricate things in space, and in space, outside of the spaceship, the space dust is so small, it's I forget what it is, micrometers or even smaller. And it's so abrasive that if it lubricant, those small dust particles could really tear up the stuff that they're trying to lubricate. And that's a big problem they've been working on for a while now. And there's some stuff I've seen about it, but most of it's really hush government stuff, and the Air Force works on a lot of it. And then there's also talk about trying to make a regenerating grease that would use the oxygen of the grease to turn into a different type of grease. And then from when it's oxidized to a specific form, it could be reduced back by adding small amounts of a oxidizing agent, and then go right back to the other grease. So you can keep flipping between those two greases, and therefore limit the amount of grease we have to use, the amount of grease we have to dispose of, and the amount of grease we have to buy. And just applications of grease, as you guys know, roller coasters, gears, bicycles, ball bearings, elevators, firearms. Pretty much everything has moving parts. Grease is in some way or another. If not grease, then oil, which is the basis of grease. And then grease is among the most important discoveries of the human race, especially in modern day, except for modern soap or modern antiseptics. and almost everything in the moving parts is lubricated with some form of oil or grease. And I had a video show, but it was really bad quality, and it was pretty much just talking about the physics theory. I told you that nothing is smooth and everything has abrasions on it, and reduced the friction of the grease. Like there's even greases that we put on, they would harden into these abrasions, making the surface a lot more smoother, but still having the slipperiness of grease. And well, I couldn't show it because I said the quality's bad. I think some of the video too.